I just want to go ahead and welcome everyone to the Future Cost of Higher Education panel. My name is Brendan Rooks. I'll be your moderator for this panel. I am a current undergraduate student at the University of California, Riverside, and the Government Affairs Coordinator at the nonprofit advocacy group Student Debt Crisis, which has over 2 million supporters and advocates for student debt cancellation. I'm being joined today by Alex Niles, who is the Government Relations Chair at the University of California Student Association, Jasmine Prasad, the Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the Student Senate for California Community College, and Anthony Ruiz, the Vice President of Finance at the Cal State Student Association. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to each of you to real quickly just introduce yourselves and the organization that you work for. So Alex, if you want to go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm serving as UCSA's Government Relations Chair this year. UCSA represents undergraduate students at all 9 undergraduate UC campuses.
Great. Jasmine, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasmine, Vice President of Legislative Affairs for the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. We represent roughly around 2 million students across 116 campuses, so just advocating on issues that pertain to them.
Great. And finally, Anthony.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Anthony, and I'm the Vice President of Finance for the Cal State Student Association, or CSSA for short. We represent the California State University system, so all 23 campuses and nearly 500,000 students.
Great. So I just kind of want to have a pretty organic discussion, and it's interesting because each of you represent a different group of students that represent, pretty much almost all students in California. And so, I kind of want to just get started off with, what you think are the biggest challenges that students are facing today, and how has the pandemic played a role in changing the landscapes for students and adding new challenges? This is open to anyone, by the way.
I guess I'll kind of go first. So on the community college level, one thing that has definitely been a struggle for students in the past 2 years due to the pandemic is definitely mental health resources and, of course, financial aid. We are very sad to hear 1456 did get vetoed, but we're still pushing for the second half. And a lot of students are struggling just to afford community college itself. Unfortunately, it's one of the most expensive sectors. So oftentimes we think it's a cheaper alternative because we get the 2 free years, but students are still struggling with the basic needs necessities. And I'm sure we'll get into more student loans into that later, but I will pass it off to any of the other student leaders who'd like to speak.
Real quickly, Jasmine, I just want to ask, can you elaborate on what AB 1456 is?
Yeah, so AB 1456 dealt with Cal Grant reform, so increasing the eligibility requirements so more people could qualify. Even now, students are qualifying for Cal Grant, but just aren't receiving it because there isn't a lot of money allocated towards them. I know on the community college level in my own region, which is the greater Sacramento area, last year, a lot of students did receive the zero expected family contribution and qualified for other financial aids, but didn't qualify for Cal Grant, which is very concerning because it's supposed to help students. And if that money isn't being geared towards them to help them with the basic need necessities, obviously there's something wrong in the system. And we, have to ensure that obviously free college isn't expected at the moment, but definitely aim towards debt-free college.
Great, thank you. One thing I would just add about the pandemic is, so last year I chaired a group at UCSB called Lobby Corps. And that's part of our associated students government, and along with a couple of other agencies or a couple other entities in the student government, we used some of our surplus budgets because we weren't traveling during the pandemic to fund a grant program for COVID relief for students, and we got thousands of applications. I think it was close to 3,000 of a campus that is like 25,000 undergrads ish. So it was a huge number, and just the stories we got were, it was people could not pay for medical expenses. There was people who had lost jobs, people who had housing contracts that they were stuck in but had to move home during the pandemic, and so had huge housing costs. So many students had lost family members or had been, really sick themselves. the toll on financial and mental health was just like heartbreaking to see. And so you can imagine how this would derail academics, why students would need to take reduced classes or time off during the pandemic, might have to extend their stay at university. Um, and yeah, I can't emphasize how much of an impact the pandemic has had on students' ability to work, to pay for basic needs, let alone just the cost of attendance.
Yeah, adding on to Alex and Jasmine, I completely agree with them. I would also say that technology is now being considered basic needs. There is a digital divide within our students, also a learning curve with both faculty and students, like navigating the new like online learning environments. So that was a really big issue. It still really is a big issue. In our opinion, at the Cal State Student Association, we are really advocating for initiatives and programs. Not too sure if you are all familiar with the C Success program. Can't really remember the acronym right now, but essentially the chancellor's office over at the California State University, they're addressing the digital divide by giving out iPads and with like the keyboards to new students at select campuses. Right now, they're expanding that program. A lot of it is one-time funding, so they're trying to definitely expand that for future years. I would say that's a really big concern of us right now.
That gap in access to internet and technology was a similar concern for us. And a lot of the applications are for our grant program where people saying, hey, like I need money to buy a laptop so I can do my classes because I don't have access to the library anymore. Another thing, UCSA last year prioritized rural broadband budget ask to make sure that students at home have enough access to internet. And yeah, so I fully agree with that. I also want to talk about like housing was another huge consequence of the pandemic. At the start of this year, coming back from COVID, for a confluence of reasons, the UC at multiple campuses had hundreds of students who just were not able to find housing. UCSB has, like an incredibly, like terribly high rate of students who don't have settled housing right now. We have over 100 students, I believe, living in hotels that the university's rented out for the fall, although they don't know where those students are going to go after fall, and they're not planning to continue providing those hotel rooms. Some of these rooms are far from campus and pose issues like the students are like unable to purchase a meal plan and also don't have kitchens. So there's some students are having very much a struggle getting food. There's a horribly high rate of students who are homeless now or living in their cars and never, and all of these things like it makes it incredibly hard to like actually focus on your academics and do what you need to do as a university student when your living situation is just not safe and stable.
Those are all like phenomenal points. And Alex, you're absolutely right. I think, we see like the increasing like number of like houseless individuals and just seeing how that, impacts stuff. I know like myself personally, I had like multiple on-campus jobs that, I lost during the pandemic, and I kind of had to figure out where to get like my income streams from. So there is just so much like uncertainty for all students, and it's really hard to achieve academic success in that environment. So those are all great answers. And then kind of focusing more on, student loans, I know I myself am a student loan borrower. I'm sure some of you here are also student loan borrowers. I'm sure most of the people listening to the panel are student loan borrowers. Why do students take out student loans? We've had this long narrative that taking out loans was a good investment and good debt, but what's the actual lived experiences of students today?
I can go first. So I attend Folsom Lake Community College as well as San Francisco State. And for SF, I live in the dorms. I have housing, but unfortunately it is very expensive. It is almost the same amount of rent that my parents have to pay for their own house. And believe it or not, a lot of people told me, oh, that's really cheap for San Francisco. And I, came from a small town, so it's very expensive for me. I did take out loans, and it doesn't even cover the full cost of the housing portion. I have to pay, I think, $10,000 total for the entire semester. I am very grateful that I qualified for Pell Grant, and that did cover my tuition, but many students don't have that opportunity and can't even get financial aid. So they're continuously taking out loans, and they eventually do have to pay it back. But students are struggling trying to get these jobs, balance the life of a student leader, just being a student on top of classes, driving, going back and forth to work and to school, and just continuing, which one's more important. Oftentimes on the community college level, a lot of students did say, even before the pandemic, that working was more important to them because they couldn't afford to go to college, or they didn't want to take out debts because later on they're going to have to pay more and there would be an increase in it. So it's very important that people realize, although student loans might seem like the great choice, many of us try to avoid it as much as possible because it is not helpful in the long run for us.
That's a great point, Jasmine. I kind of was thinking about what Ella said in the last panel about how, previous generations don't really understand that, you can't work your way through college and not take out loans anymore. From my own personal experience, I commute to save costs. I've worked like pretty much full-time schedule my entire undergraduate, and I still have had to take out loans. So, it's how do we combat that? In California, we're lucky because we do have like pretty good, financial aid accessibility, but that doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't cover everything. So Alex and Anthony, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think at this point it's pretty widely recognized that the old connection between a bachelor's degree and employment doesn't really exist, in that just because you have a degree, like, doesn't mean you're gonna land a job that will cover your loans expenses and secure you a reasonable quality of living, or a livable income even. Um, and I think students a few years older than us, like millennials and even early Gen Zers, have really shown students in university now that that's the case, and this is, much more widely understood. Um, and I've known a lot of people who have, either decided to avoid college altogether because they don't think it'll lead to directly to employment, or they don't think it's worth the cost. I've known a lot of people who are, going to community colleges or choosing Cal State over like UC or private colleges to save money. All these things, I think students are, much more likely to consider that now.
Yeah, at least for me and kind of my friends during my undergrad, the vast majority, just exactly what Jasmine said, was to cover housing. That's what, especially like in the residence halls, that's kind of where I took out the vast majority of my loans. And I'm really thankful I necessarily haven't had to take out as much loans since. And I'm in my last year of grad school now, so I've been in college for 5.5 years now. But it is difficult just kind of having that like looming over your head. I mean, I've had that stress on me for the last 5 years, and thankfully it hasn't gotten any interest. But students are needing to work a lot more right now. I know a lot of student leaders, myself included, that are working 2 to 3 jobs. I currently have 3 jobs, which is not ideal as a graduate student, but it's not because I want to. It's because I literally have to. And it does get in the way of academics. To be honest, I can genuinely personally say I'm not getting the most out of my MBA right now, just because I am missing a lot of school. I'm not doing the best right now. Did a lot better last year as opposed to this year. And I'm trying to change that, and hopefully for my next semester, I hope I can at least reduce it down to 2 jobs so I can at least enjoy it. But that's like the sad reality of kind of like the financial aid issues right now, is students are needing to take out these loans.
That's a great point, Anthony. I agree. I'm the same way. Like I've had to work multiple jobs, and it's hard because you feel like you're not getting enough out of your college education, and you're having to take out loans, and then you have to pay off the loans, but then you have to work more because you took out loans, and it's difficult. And also on the housing point, I think it's really interesting. I'm sure this is a similar sentiment for most of you. Like for me at University of California, Riverside, our housing fees for first-year students is greater than tuition. And I'm sure that's like a very common sentiment among most California students, considering our high cost of living. So we already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about the mental health toll of student loans on students, any like personal, anecdotes you can share or stories that, you guys have leveraged. A lot of times throughout this entire summit, we've talked about how important it is for us as students to share our stories and to, lobby to, our federal officials to make sure that they know the impact that student loans are having on us.
Well, I can, start by saying UCSA has been, along with the Cal State Student Association and the SSCCC, together, California Public Schools have kind of been leading a national coalition of student associations pushing to double the Pell Grant. And I'll say what we talk about to legislators when we're talking about Pell Grant expansion. You know, students that are, have high levels of debt, it constrains what career options and life decisions you're able to make post grad. Maybe there's something you're passionate about, maybe you want to become a teacher or something, but you can't financially, that's not financially tenable for you, and you have to do something else. Or you might have to, like, I don't know anyone who's like even remotely thinking they're close to buying a home or anything, which everyone's renting for as far as any of us can see. Starting a family, like, shit, I don't know. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to start a family or anything, just because of, like, needing to get financial security first. So a lot of these kind of conversations, it really constrains your future and weighs tremendously on what options you're able to take post grad.
Go ahead, Jasmine.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, going off of that, I definitely think like it is a huge amount of stress just because, like, as previously stated, like a lot of students think in order to get a job, or at least a decent paying job, they have to go to college, but also people are starting to realize like that's not entirely the case. And with that comes like, okay, once I do graduate, like I'm paying all this money to go to a higher institution to get my degree, and then it's the stress of some of those people aren't even getting into the job that they have like degrees for. And so it's like, I spent all this money, I have all this debt now, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I mean, I can't get a job, and it's just so much stress that's on top of them. And a lot of students don't have access to, or at least on the community college side, to a lot of mental health services, so that's also hard for them. But I definitely think like just trying to find a job and going into the workforce straight out of college just puts on so much stress for students. I know I'm still a student and I'm like stressed. Okay, am I going to be able to get a job? Like, should I get one like right now? That's a decent job that most people would require a degree for, just because it is that stress of how am I going to pay this off in the future. Like, obviously you have the increase in for it. I forgot what the actual term is in like financial stuff. I'm a poli-sci major, not a finance major, but it does stress a lot of students out. And unfortunately, I've seen within the first week, some people quit housing, or again, like just people giving up on school because they can't afford it at all.
Great. Anthony, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would also say that just I'm thankful that I don't have like a lot of debt, but I have friends that who are, like, have like 20,000 plus, even more than that, and they're just like, I can tell that they're obviously like nobody wants to take out debt, but they do seem down when like the topic does come up. They just rely so heavily on that just because there's no other option for them to like stay here, just because a lot of them are like first gen, or their parents aren't able to support them as much. And I'm in Chico, so a lot of our students do come from like Southern California, the Bay, far away, and they really don't have that support system up here, so they just default to the loans, and that does take a toll on you over time. I mean, it has for me for the last 5 years. But like I said earlier, I'm thankful that the interest hasn't built up yet. And there is that worry about getting a job, especially right now with this job market. And I think it was Jasmine that mentioned people, or Alex, one of you two mentioned that people are getting jobs that aren't necessarily even in their field. That's part of the reason why I'm switching kind of my field of study. My undergrad was in sociology and social sciences, and I'm really passionate about those two disciplines, that area. But I ended up pursuing a business degree just for like kind of financial security as well. And that was part of it, was because of my student loans. And I know it's probably not like the best mindset to have, but Back then, I thought if I wanted to pursue my master's in sociology or psychology. Just from a lot of like negative sentiments from other people, just kind of like deterred me away from that. And I went to something that was a little bit, I guess more uh, welcome to the job market. So there's that aspect to that did affect me just because of my loads.
Absolutely. I actually really resonate with that statement. I'm a public policy student, and, we've heard previously about how a lot of people within public service, don't really get paid amazingly well. And, also within just the public service loan forgiveness program, how there's such a high denial rate. That's definitely one thing that I worry about, because I know for a lot of like the jobs that I would want to get, I would need to go and get my master's. And for like public service related master's programs, you don't really get that much funding. And so, just kind of the state of play and, considering how much debt I already have, it makes me really consider if even going and get my master's is worth it, and kind of makes me question, a lot of things about my future. And I'm sure, most people in our situation and most students in general feel like a pretty tremendous amount of financial anxiety. I know I do. So this is kind of like, we've talked about how, what the like sentiments and how we feel as students, and we've kind of touched on already the different ways that like your organizations have tried to create change, but what can the colleges and universities do to better support students so they don't have to take out the loans in the first place, and what can they do better to support students that already have loans?
I mean, to start on the first question, I guess I would say, short of a specific recommendation, just keeping in mind that a big driver of costs, I think at all three segments, is basic needs or the general cost of attendance beyond just tuition. Um, even at the UC where tuition is highest in the three segments, like I think it's something like 40% of our lowest income students don't pay any tuition. And yet we still have most of those students, I would say, are graduating with over $10,000 in debt, and that's because of the cost of attendance. So just keeping in mind that it's the cost of paying for food, for paying for transportation. We don't live in a state where public transportation is necessarily extremely accessible. Housing has just gone through the roof, of course. It's incredibly high. UC Santa Barbara, it's you know I think university owned housing is something like 1,000 or more a quarter. When I was a freshman, not counting in food. Um, yeah, you're paying probably, or not a quarter, sorry, a month. You're paying at least $10,000 a year for your housing, um, medical expenses, mental health expenses. These are essential components of getting the most out of our college education, making these degrees worth it. But they're incredibly expensive as well, especially when on-campus services are, struggle like our CAPS at the UC struggles to provide long-term care for students. There's something like a 3-week wait time to get an appointment if you're not considered a priority. Um, so a lot, keeping in mind the full range of cost of attendance and basic needs in driving up student loans, I think, UC has made some progress. They deserve credit for that. Like student regents led a conversation within the board of regents on changing the definition of basic needs, and that has allowed for a much more holistic recognition of what basic needs entails. But making sure that we do that consistently when the state gives funding and within colleges and universities.
Absolutely. I just kind of want to like add on to that point too, specifically with the regents, like looking at also just like tuition increases and making sure that we as students are fighting against tuition increases, especially as like the cohort tuition model has come into effect. Do Anthony or Jasmine, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, basic needs, cannot stress that enough, is something that so many students are struggling with. And huge, shout out to the legislature for allocating 30 million ongoing for basic needs centers and coordinators on community college campuses. And with that, we've been really diving down deeper with the governor's work group on what the true definition of basic needs is. And I brought up the point that when they presented to the board we have to start looking at why some of these programs aren't benefiting students and how to fix those solutions. I know when I've been doing a bunch of pledge visits for our priorities, one office stated, we've already been giving a lot of programs to undocumented students, for example. How come it's not helping them? But after being in a webinar with a student speaking, they told me, they're still being charged out-of-state tuition, even though they live in state. So obviously there's some concerns of these programs aren't working for students, and the college and administrations need to figure out why and how we can, truly make sure that the model of the program is actually helping students to prevent them from, lacking these resources or going on to student debt and not obtaining these financial aid resources. Because at the end of the day, like once they struggle with all of those, they can't afford college as a whole. Like tuition is not the full cost of college, which I think a lot of people, have the idea that it is, but there's so many other aspects that play into that. And, I didn't really realize how many other fees we pay until there's a rundown for my CSU. It shows us everything. And I was like, wow, tuition that shows right here, it's not the full cost. There's so many other basic necessities that we have to pay for. And even that's not even fully covered within our original cost of college. So I think just definitely looking into the programs, why they aren't working for students, instead of saying like, oh, we've already given so much. Obviously they're not working. It's up to the administration to fix that problem. And also for, just students to keep advocating, I think to the legislative level is always helpful of, sharing their personal story, because once a member does hear that, they're more sympathetic and realize, okay, like there's a problem here. We need to fix this for our constituents.
Oh, sorry, Anthony. No, go.
No, it's okay. You go first.
I just want to quickly add, Jasmine was talking, you're talking about like resources or services for, specific groups of students. When universities provide resource centers or other services targeted towards specific, like students with specific identities, whether, that's students who are former foster youths or undocumented students or students who are coming in, having been system impacted by the carceral system, providing specific services geared towards these students can certainly help students navigate financial aid or grants or any other resources that might be available to them, but that might have, specific challenges to accessing given their unique situation. So that's not, resource centers and services are not going to prevent students from having to take out loans, but it can definitely, ensure that students aren't falling through the cracks and missing out on resources that would be available for them, but might be particularly difficult for them to access.
Adding on to that, Alex, that's really great that you mentioned that, because that's what I mentioned too. So at Chico State, we have this new program. It's called Adelante, and it's essentially it's like a pipeline program. It's very similar to like EOP and TRIO, if you have that on your campuses, which I think they do statewide. And Adelante is really unique to Chico State. It's essentially for sophomores through seniors. And it's we do like workshop like presentations, we do like outreach to them. It is like a mentorship program, so we have graduate advisors, and essentially it is targeted for first generation and or Latinx students. And it is funded entirely through a grant through the Department of Education. That it's a 5-year grant, and we got it because Chico State's a Hispanic serving institution, and we're only in the 2nd year of the program. And unfortunately, this program wasn't around when I was an undergrad. It started right when I started grad school. So this is my 2nd year working for the program. But we do like a lot of great work with outreach, the presentation. They even offer summer research opportunities for our undergraduate students, and it's like a pretty decent stipend for them as well as a faculty member. And the grant was essentially written by the Dean of Graduate Studies as well as the Dean of Undergraduate Studies. So, these high-level positions were the ones that like sought after this. Like students didn't necessarily know that we needed this program, but it was like these two like university officials, admin, that really fought for that. And I would say that's what university officials need to do, is advocate for programs like these. They help out a lot of students. I think we serve about 200 students a year, and in this second cohort, we're about to hit 400 students. And then it's supposed to be a class, kind of like an elective. It hasn't started right now just because of of COVID, but they're gonna like make it into an actual in-person class where students do get elective units that meet their graduation requirements. So I would really like advocate for programs like these to be implemented statewide.
That's great.
And
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to add about like when it comes to accessing programs like that or whatever service or guidance through applying for financial aid and grants, whatever it might be, touching back on the question of how the pandemic has changed things, I really think that so many students, as the pandemic, shut down campuses and switched remote, I think that there's a high chance that many students, missed certain information, had a hard time finding the support they needed, finding the information that might have been readily available from like counselors on campus. I think, it's important for universities to really wonder like who do we miss over the pandemic, or who didn't come into us because, they had sick family members, they had to work more, or they had other struggles that kept them from doing that, or who didn't just know where to reach out to, or whatever it may be, like really trying to make sure that students who might have fallen through the cracks there are reached now that we're back.
Yeah, I agree, Alex. That's really important. I think too, it's especially important since, COVID disproportionately impacted like low income and communities of color, making sure that like people that are impacted the most by like these financial decisions are the ones that are getting information. Kind of on that point too, I wanted to talk to y'all about, exactly how we even get information to students about paying for college. And when the best time for getting this information to students is. Like, should it be done, during college? Should there be more like financial literacy and college preparation classes done in high school? What exactly like is it that should be done? Because like I know also for myself, like there's scholarship opportunities that like I qualified for, but I didn't find out about until, like recently. So what can we do to make sure that students are aware of what's out there, and what can universities and the education system do to promote greater financial literacy?
I mean, for one, again, being proactive, I just know from my experience, um, one, it can be hard to know what questions to even ask or what all you need to do or where to even start. Um, Also, other things can get in the way, like, just life or other concerns, or, deadlines for assignments can kind of get in the way and make it too easy to put those off. So, proactive outreach, and then really like, doing as much as possible, really sit with students and guide them through the process. Like, FAFSA is like, what is that? It's a lot for a high school student. I also think it's never too early to start. I know that as difficult as it is for a student in high school to make a long-term financial decision, like, we're still able to think about these things well, and the more information, the better able we are to do it.
Yeah, I definitely think allowing students to know like as early as possible in high school, probably even as soon as junior year, because that's when a lot of people start thinking about what college they attend, to get familiar with the resources. I know around senior year, they start telling us about FAFSA, making sure we fill out the application. But I think another important issue that we need to touch on in the K through 12 system is definitely scholarships. I think a lot of students have that stigma. I know I certainly did when I was in high school, that, scholarships are only for those who play sports. So I devoted my life to sports, even though I ended up not loving it as much as I did when I was younger. And that's not the case. There's so many other scholarships for students out there, where it pertains to their passions, if they're art, or if they want to go into some other major. And I think, with that, there's also scholarships that nobody applies for because they just don't know about it. So I think familiarizing students of, okay, what passions pertain to you, and let's find what scholarships you can apply for, so you do have some financial security when going into college.
I mean, I didn't even know that scholarships, like, yeah, I didn't even know to think about applying to scholarships until like partway through my freshman year of college. So totally agree.
So I was really fortunate enough in my high school. I was a part of it's called the Criminal Justice Magnet Academy. It's in Sacramento, and it's through a few of the high schools, and it's in partnership with the Sacramento Police Department. And they did a lot of outreach to us regarding kind of like a career exploration, but as well college and scholarships, and like they would like force us essentially to do it. Like it'd be like an assignment to apply for certain scholarships. But the thing is, I know like a lot of people don't have that, I guess, that opportunity to. I definitely wouldn't have been as successful myself if I wasn't in this program. I wasn't really a proactive student at first in high school and early on in college. Like I really needed like that extra support, and I was a part of it was a first generation support program at Chico State. It's called Reach, and like without those types of programs, I definitely wouldn't be in grad school now. I wouldn't have had all these opportunities that I have been able to take advantage of the last couple of years. I know there. I guess like the university can do only so much. Like a lot of it does rely like on ourselves as a student, but also like it's important to recognize that students do have like outside things going on, like family issues, jobs. Like not everybody can like devote as much time to applying for scholarships or looking at other avenues. A lot of students are just literally don't know. Like they're first gen, they're doing this for the first time. They don't like their family can't necessarily like support them. Just that's kind of what happened with me. Like my family wanted to support me as much as possible, but they didn't like literally didn't know what college is. Like my dad was only went up to the sixth grade, and before he came over to Mexico, he didn't go to school. And my stepmom, she went to school in Mexico too, didn't go to college, so just didn't really understand how to navigate, I guess, university life in America. So I think universities should. I don't know if all schools do this. I really don't know how other schools function, just because I did my undergrad, did my grad at Chico, but we have the Wildcat Scholarship. So it's one application process. It opens up like in early January, it closes in February, and it's for all students, whether you're a current undergrad, graduate student, or even if you're a high school senior, apply to Chico State and you plan to attend Chico State in the fall, you can still take advantage of the scholarship application process. Basically, it's one application. There's 5 prompts. It's about like a 1-page response per question, and that single application applies to about 700 scholarships that we have at Chico, just like one general scholarship. Because realistically, like what student has time to apply to that many scholarship at once when they're working and they have family obligations, school, so I would like to see more support programs that definitely advocate just for financial aid, applied for colleges and such at early ages, but also while you're in university, for the university to do as much outreach as possible.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely agree. And, I think the whole point about, first generation students and just like institutional knowledge, so many students that go to colleges in California are first generation students or come from low income backgrounds. And it's really hard to, get support once you're in college. And I think that's a really great point. So we've kind of talked about what universities can do to, increase more awareness about student loans and financial literacy for students. But what can the state of California itself do to prevent students from taking out loans in the first place? And how can we reform financial aid or invest in students to prevent the needs to take out student loans?
They can start by expanding Cal Grant eligibility, as outlined in AB 1456, that's removing requirements for age, GPA, time out of college, things like that.
Great. Anthony, Jasmine, anything else you have to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with Alex. I think that's been a huge priority for all of us. I really do kind of I guess the collaborations between the different student organizations and bodies that are recognized at the state and federal level. I'm relatively newer to CSSA. This is my first year serving as an executive officer, but last year I was involved as a governing member. I said on the Finance Legislative Affairs Committee, and there's a lot of great work that our student leaders have done. I think the state, from the CSU side, the chancellor's office, they need to recognize that they do recognize that students are going through difficult times. I think they need to have like a more student leaders, students at large, kind of like front and center, giving like their perspective, their opinion on how they're, I guess, like the issue that they're dealing with financially. I think that really helps out because these are the people that make the decisions, and they do value student input and voices. And from a lot of the times that we've had meetings with, like let's say like at the chancellor's office, they say that like they're really thankful that like they get to see like at least some students. They never have the opportunity to talk to students directly, which is an issue because like these are the people that like are making the decisions regarding our academics, the finances behind it, the cost, and they don't even have the opportunity because just their job prohibits them. They have way too many other obligations. So I basically added on. I think what we do is really great with like the Fixed Financial Aid Coalition. I love seeing the efforts between the different student bodies. I love seeing student advocates. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Great. I just want to clarify for the audience. You guys have formed this strong coalition in California, the Fixed Financial Aid Coalition. Can you tell us like a little bit more about what exactly that is and the work that you guys have done?
Oh, sorry, Anthony.
Oh no, I'll definitely pass it on to you. Yeah.
So FFA is a collaboration between the student associations of the community colleges, Cal State, and the UC. We started a few years ago, and we've been working closely with the California Student Aid Commission as well as other coalition partners since. And really, the biggest thing that's come out of that is just very close student input and coordination that went into forming the ideas of AB 1456, that landmark Cal Grant reform bill. And so it's just been this incredible body for getting the student perspective closely factored into decisions, state level decisions on financial aid and Cal Grant. And I think it really shows like, what great results come out of when students are closely consulted on, our needs and our perspectives firsthand. And it's just been tremendously effective.
Great. Jasmine, did you want to add to that or talk more about what California can do to prevent students from having to take out student loans?
Sure. So, as Alex stated and Anthony, I'm so grateful for the FFA, Fixed Financial Aid Coalition, because, with all the student leaders together, it really does show how much students across the state are struggling, no matter what sector or background they come from. But I do know regarding student loans, there was a bill in, I believe, the 2019 to 2020 legislative session that had like borrower and loan restrictions just to notify, when payments are due. So just although like some bills might seem really small, they are such progressive bills because obviously something can't be implemented right away. There has to be baby steps and see like, okay, is this working for students? Is this helping them pay off their student loan debt? Just getting notified in advance, like when their payment's due, so they can coordinate, what time they get paid from their work schedule. Because oftentimes, we do have bills and we can't always pay those bills if we have to wait till we get paid. I know that's a huge struggle for many students. So just having small implementations like that, seeing if it is working and continuing to build off of that and making sure that there isn't, I forgot the word, Anthony stated it earlier because I'm not a finance major, but when they increase it, I cannot think of it at the moment, but yeah, I'm trying to think, but I can't. But when they start increasing it after like a certain amount of time, just so they can still get allocated money back to them, oftentimes it seems like those loan companies are benefiting off the students and not, it almost seems like, oh, we're here to help you pay off debt, but in reality, like interest, that's what it is. They're gaining a lot of interest out of it. So it's like, we're here to help, but in reality, you're just giving us a lot more money than we gave you, which is very concerning. So it's definitely issues like that that should be looked at on the legislative level, and really hearing students' perspective of how they're struggling and what are some ideas that they think the state could help them achieve those gaps and prevent that from happening to them.
That's a great point. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. There's also a bill in the legislature, SB 20, that would automatically notify community college students about eligibility for CalFresh. I think facilitate their application process for that by like, But anyway, so doing things like that at the other segments as well to automatically notify and facilitate the application process for students. like if students are already providing information in one place that would help complete their application for something like CalFresh somewhere else, then combining those applications to the extent possible and taking keeping students from having to repeat the same thing over and over again, things like that can really help. Also removing overly onerous like work requirements on receiving food benefit. It's yeah, it's pretty, some of the CalFresh work requirements for students are pretty excessive right now. Also making sure that undocumented students are fully able to access CalFresh benefits as well. Because currently, I think undocumented students, for those that don't know, are not able to receive CalFresh because it's part of the federal level. So there's a bill, SB 464, that would fund CalFresh benefits for undocumented people in California at the state level.
Great. Those are all great answers. And then I also kind of wanted to just bring up, like Jasmine, you had brought it up, that, right now the student loan payment pods, we're all current students, so we hopefully aren't in repayment. But, there's like millions of students nationwide that, will be starting to begin their payments on February 1st after the student loan payment pause was put into effect last March, and so I guess I'm just kind of curious too, what work, because I know for us as current students, a lot of times we like to focus on like college affordability because that's where we're at currently. But like, what can we be doing more? And, what kind of work has the organizations that you guys are part of been doing to, kind of look at like the student debt crisis issue as it currently exists as well?
I think what we can be doing more is definitely looking into ways to prolong that, or just look at, some eligibility requirements that, look at case by case studies. For example, I know on the federal level regarding CalFresh SNAPs, Pell Grant recipients now automatically qualify for CalFresh if they live in the state of California. But when you fill out the application, it only asks you if you're Cal Grant A or B. But it's like, wait, I qualify for Pell Grant, so why am I not being able to complete that portion of the application? So I know they're still trying to expand that to where they can still receive it even after, executive orders and the pandemic slowly transitions out, because a lot of students are still struggling. Obviously, if they're still getting a grant, may not be the in-state Cal Grant, they're still struggling from a low-income family. So seeing if, we can also look to that when it comes to student loan debts, like students are paying this, they can't afford to pay off their debt at this moment. They're still struggling to find jobs, struggling to get on campus jobs. They can only work a certain amount of hours per week if they work on campus. And then on top of that, as I think Anthony said, he has 2 to 3 jobs. That's an excessive amount on top of being a student leader. And then on top of classwork, it's very stressful. So just seeing, what requirements, or like how to look at a case by case studies of, okay, can we wait a little bit longer, or wait until they have a stable job to start paying off that debt without having too much of an interest for them, because obviously it takes time for students and honestly anybody to get back on their feet. And I know with community college students, our average age is around 21 to 25. So obviously they took some time before getting back into college because they thought, I can afford college, now I can. And even though I'm still struggling, I don't have the money, I barely have the money to afford community college. How am I going to now pay off my debt? So I think that's definitely a concern that needs to be looked at.
Great. Alex or Anthony, do you have anything else you want to add?
I think that was great, Jasmine. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it was a very comprehensive answer. Thank you. And then I also just kind of wanted to ask y'all, about like the individual organizations that you work with. What are your priorities within, funding higher education like right now? And, what work have you done like yourself or with your organization that you're particularly proud of, where you feel has like made an impact for students and for borrowers?
I mean, you know, I think all 3 of these segments are just do incredible work every year in uplifting the student voice to our administrations and to the legislature. But I'll give one example that I'm especially proud of on the UCSA end. Well, this actually something we all did jointly, but We recently got a $550 Pell Grant expansion included in the Build Back Better budget reconciliation bill. It's a lot of B's. That's built on the backs of a work of a whole national coalition of people that have been pushing for Pell Grant expansion. But it was the student voice getting in the room with key legislators that I think did really push that over the edge and make sure that we got that amount secured. $550 is not even remotely close to enough Pell Grant expansion to actually restore the Pell Grant to providing that level of affordability that it used to. It's just not enough for students, but it's a strong first step, and it's something that we'll continue to build on in the future as we get more Pell Grant expansion and restore the Pell to what it used to be able to do for students.
That's a great point. Yeah, I know that like with y'all in the Fund the UC campaign, like Pell Grant expansion is like one of the biggest things. I'm kind of interested, you brought up the Build Back Better plan and everything. And, I know Ella was on here previously talking about free college and talking about, the free community college proposal that was in the Build Back Better plan. And it looks like, obviously that's not in the plan anymore. So, I'm kind of interested to see, what y'all have to say as well about, free college proposals and, what we can be doing as students to make sure that we're advocating for those as thoroughly as we can.
Yeah, so for the free college proposal, very sad to hear the 2 free years were cut out, because although California does have that already implemented within the community college side, it would still be beneficial to us because that money could have been allocated towards increasing Cal Grant, making sure more students can obtain financial aid, or even towards housing implementation, because community colleges do not have housing structures, and that is one of the most important issues that students still talk about to this day. So just implementing it in towards basic need aspects for our community college campuses. But we are still advocating as much as we can on the community college level through SSCCC. We have heard a lot of student concerns, and very grateful for a lot of the feedback that some members have been giving to us. I know recently there was a listening tour, and many students are struggling with mental health, and we're looking to fund more mental health services just so it can help students, because a lot of students don't have insurance, and it's really hard for them to obtain, somebody to talk to, a counselor, even get anxiety, depression, ADHD medication that can help them through their educational career. So it's very important that we allocate more of the funds. We did get 30 million ongoing, so very happy that the legislature did see a lot of the student struggles during the pandemic, and can thank them enough for so many progressive bills that helped, whether it be pertaining to CalFresh, making students learn about it during orientation across all 3 sectors, or even basic needs and mental health allocation, even OER textbooks. They just allocated so much funding, and we are so extensively grateful for that. But there's still a lot more work that has to be done, that although funding does solve those problems, but it's the finer details. So I'm in our own organization right now. We're looking to have licensed psychiatrists on every community college campuses. I do know the CSU system does have that, and I cannot thank them enough for implementing that on so many campuses, because it is so helpful to the students. They look at their financial aid aspect and their income, so they can make sure it is affordable to them. So seeing how we can also do that for our community college students.
I would like to, before we head out, I wanted to add on, over at the CSSA, we just recently passed our 2021-2022 policy agenda. It's located on our website, so it's accessible to everyone. But I did really want to highlight our first priority. The whole policy agenda has 4 priorities and 17 goals under, but I wanted to highlight the first priority that we have, and it's to ensure students have access to baseline services and resources in order for them to enable educational accessibility. And I'll just quickly read through some of the goals. With goal number 1 being access to reliable technology, broadband. Number 2 is addressing student housing insecurity and homelessness. Number 3 is addressing student food insecurity. And there's a few other ones, but I just wanted to really highlight those 2, because that is what we really have been focused on as an organization for the last couple of years, and we're going to continue to do so. Even now, it's addressing like the digital divide. But but I love to see all the great work that all three organizations are doing, representing all students to see or in the state of California, which I think is huge.
Great, that's amazing. Too, and I just want to ask like one final question before we do our closing remarks. It's amazing that like y'all have been able to kind of set up this like big California coalition, of students. And, we're seeing right now that like students have like a very like important voice in determining like policy and like what, policy is being enacted, and, just making sure that we're fully like mobilizing students. And, I'm just kind of curious to like what y'all have like thought, or if y'all have any thoughts about, trying to organize and mobilize students on a more like national basis, because like obviously y'all have done it within California, and what work can be done to better organize and, create larger impact through more national organization.
I mean, there used to be a national U.S. student association that went defunct a few years back. And then since then, I think one of the biggest things that is kind of, I mean, since then, UCSA has played a role in forming this national coalition of student associations and admins that have been working to double the Pell Grant. Even we're still building this coalition. We've been taking meetings with, we had one with Northern Illinois University, was our most recent meeting of just, getting more folks on board with this work. And, I think the lesson is there's different capacities in different places, but students everywhere are ready and able to do this work. And a lot can come out of this, like, kind of level of coordination. And so the Pell Grant Coalition building has been really, educational and inspiring story. And we're having conversations about maybe other issue areas where increased national level coordination would be beneficial. One of those being related to undocumented student issues, is to be specific.
Great. Anthony or Jasmine, do you have anything you want to add to that real quick?
I think that'd be great. I'm not too sure kind of where there have been like previous efforts, at least with the CSSA's part, just because I'm relatively new to the organization. That's something that I'm going to ask. I think that'd be great. But I do know that our president, CSA president, he has been reached out to. He's been reached out by like various universities, and he has met with them. And it's like a lot. I think it was that some students within HBCUs that were. They're trying to form like their own, I guess, like student organization. So I think that would be really great also. But I'm not too familiar with the whole processes behind all that.
Great. All right. I just want to, we're closing here, closing in on time here. So I just want to thank my panelists, Alex Niles, Anthony Ruiz, and Jasmine Prasad. Thank you all for attending the Free My Future Student Debt Summit. Please stay tuned for the next event, the Student Debt Workshop, where you'll get all the updates on what's currently going on with student loans and get your questions answered about your loans. Led by Student Debt Crisis Center and Savvy, you'll get a walkthrough of applying for public service loan forgiveness, including a rundown of recently announced reforms to the program. That's the Student Debt Workshop starting shortly here at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you very much. And I'd like to again just thank my panelists, Alex, Jasmine, and Anthony. Thank you.